Eating dietary fats is important for a number of reasons because of what they do for us and because when we eat them, we end up with less of an overabundance of other things that could hurt us. So what do I mean by that? If you're trying to eliminate fats, then you're going to end up eating more carbohydrate or protein or both. And while there's nothing inherently bad about 25-30% of your calories as protein, the reality is that much of the protein, the way it's processed, the way the animals live before slaughter, the way we overcook steaks, the processing of dairy sources, there's a lot of complicating factors with processing at each stage that can make protein less healthy than it would have been many years ago. And so cutting back on some of the protein sources like red meats and has a lot to do with what we do to those foods or to those animals or what we feed those animals, hormones and things like that. So high protein may or may not be healthy depending on your environment. If you're the Inuit or the Cree up in the Arctic region and your diet is very high in protein and fats and relatively low in carbohydrate, if you had that much protein and fats in the United States with the processed food sources that we eat, you would not be healthy like they are on a similar macronutrient ratio. So cutting out fats ends up putting in more protein or carbohydrate or both, and that can end up being a problem in terms of too much carbohydrate or too much protein of the types that are available. If you're getting your carbohydrates and your protein sources from natural, which tend to be fairly expensive and hard to get sources, then you're getting a closer approximation to how some peoples may have eaten a few thousand years back, and it's not a problem. But replacing dietary fats with other food groups in westernized society ends up being a problem. Separate from that, fats actually do critically important things for you. So it isn't bad to be on a low-fat diet just because you're having to introduce other things that in large amounts can be a problem, but because a low-fat diet also results in the loss of the benefits that you would have gotten from the fats themselves. Omega-3 and omega-6 fats, which is carbon counting. An omega-3 fat has a double bond 3 carbons from the end of the fat chain. An omega-6 fat has a double bond 6 carbons away from the end of the fat chain. Our bodies can't produce those. Their concentration is higher in the synapse between neurons than anywhere else in the body, so it's critical for thought processes and brain function, reduces the recovery time and how bad the endpoint is after brain trauma, increases learning rate, reduces Alzheimer's and depression in a statistically significant way. So omega-3 and 6 fats that the body cannot produce are therefore called essential, meaning we have to eat them because we can't produce them. Omega-6 fats are very high in all nuts and seeds. So it's easy to remember what is a food that's high in omega-6. All nuts and seeds. Omega-3 fats are not in very many foods. And so omega-3 fats are in some select fatty fish, salmon, sardines, herring, as well as some others that are higher in mercury, like mackerel, and so it doesn't matter that they're higher in omega-3 because they're also high in mercury. So salmon and sardines, the two fish that start with an S and are readily available in cans, are very high in omega-3 and very low in mercury levels, significantly lower than tuna. Tuna only has 1/5 or less the amount of fats of those other fish that I just mentioned, and very small amounts of omega-3 fats. So salmon, sardines, and two types of seeds, chia seeds and flax seeds. You only need a tablespoon of them, or if you're using the oil from flax, for example, you'd only need a half teaspoon. It doesn't take very much. Walnuts are the only nut that are high in omega-3, but you need a quarter cup of them to meet your daily needs. The Institute of Medicine's adequate intake guidelines in the dietary reference intakes for omega-3 fats are about a dozen calories worth per day, 14 calories for men, 11 for women, so averaging about 12 calories. Since fats are 9 calories per gram, that's about 1.25 grams of omega-3 fats. So if you were going to go the supplement path, flax tablets or fish oil tablets, it would be 2 small tablets or 1 larger one that would give you on the order of a gram of omega-3 fats. If it's not highly processed tablets or fish or flax oil, then about half of the fats will be omega-3 fats. So if you're using nuts or seeds as your omega-3, as your omega-6 source, then you'd want about 3 times the amount of omega-6 as what you're eating as omega-3 for optimum health. So for each serving of omega-3, which may be coming from 3 to 4 ounces of salmon, or a tablespoon of chia or flax seeds in your oatmeal, then to balance that, you would have a couple tablespoons, maybe as much as 3 tablespoons of nuts, or half that amount in any nut butter. Additionally, studies on the Mediterranean diet have shown us that monounsaturated fats increase health significantly, which is surprising because the body can make monounsaturated fats. So for reasons that are beyond our current understanding, eating them, and not just depending on the body to make them, ends up improving health significantly. So what are the monounsaturated fat sources? Olives, olive oil, and avocado. So using some dressing that isn't low fat, because that of course would be the olive oil that's in there, and you want to go with extra virgin olive oil to minimize the rancidity that's produced in the processing of the oils. Use a fatty dressing with extra virgin olive oil on your salad. Don't try to avoid the dressing unless you're putting a lot of fats on the salad in other forms like olives or sunflower seeds or nuts or avocado. Then you could go with a lower fat dressing. You could use the lemon oil or the balsamic vinegar and not use the oil mixed with it. Like if I have a salad and I'm putting a lot of other fats on there, I'll just use the balsamic vinegar. If I'm not putting a lot of other fats on there, then I will include the olive oil with the vinegar. So omega-3s, salmon, sardines, chia or flax, walnuts. Omega-6s, nuts and seeds. Monounsaturated fatty acids, olives, extra virgin olive oil, and avocado. And then there's saturated fats from plants and from animals. Plant saturated fats, which are from tropical regions, coconut, cocoa beans, palm, those are shorter chain saturated fats and lauric acid and do not worsen health. They raise total cholesterol, but they raise HDL sufficiently while raising LDL, the good and bad, so to speak, as they're usually called, that it actually improves your ratio and makes you healthier to eat them. That's very different from animal saturated fats, which are longer chain and do have some potential negatives for health. I mean, when you get animal fats in lower amounts from wild animals or pasture-fed or grass-fed, then it's not at all clear that eating those foods are bad for you. But the more highly processed, the grain-fed cows that are not moving very much before slaughter, and so they have more marbling and more fat accumulation, not only is the longer saturated fat a potential issue, but there's a lot more of it. And And then, of course, with how we cook them and burn steaks and things, then you end up with a higher cancer risk, which is a whole separate issue. So look for an omega-3, an omega-6, and a monounsaturated fat source somewhere in your day, if possible, at a minimum every other day, each of these three sources, and don't avoid plant-saturated fats. Just eat them like you would salad dressing. I mean, they're high in calories, but that doesn't mean you can't eat some chocolate and get significant health benefits out of that, not just because of the catechins that have been in the press for reducing heart disease risk, but the fats are actually good for you, the saturated fats that are in plants. And it's just the saturated fats in animals that we're looking to limit a little bit. So no more than 7 to 10% of your total calories based on the American Heart Association's guidelines, which I think is a reasonable way of thinking about a limit, is to use their guidelines, which would basically mean that you could eat egg yolks as long as you're not eating a ton of cheese, or you could drink whole fat milk as long as you're not eating a bunch of bacon and other fat sources. But if you like bacon, then maybe you'd go with the non-fat milk instead of the whole fat milk, right? So you're choosing which animal fat sources you like and excluding the ones that you don't like as much. So if you've got, let's say, an omelet with egg yolks and cheese on top and toast with butter and bacon on the side, well, you have 4 animal fat sources, and it's reasonable to ask yourself the question, which 2 of those could I eliminate and which 2 do I feel like including? And on the next day you can make a choice of different ones than you did today. So it's always up to your free will and decision which ones that you're choosing. And that is how your nutrition will cater to your personality and who you are as a starting point, and then bring in the science to help you with whatever your physiological target is.